Okay, last one, 25. How can we best deal with water pollution? Okay, reduce soil erosion, reduce the amount of fertilizer. No fertilizer on sloped lands. This is basically what we covered at the end of last last section right here. Organic farming, use pesticides only when needed. Use an integrated pest management approach where you rely on other things aside from just chemicals. Maybe hand picking if you have a small farm. Biological controls, using one organism to control another. Let's see, converting farm waste to renewable biofuel. I think we had an FRQ, right, that dealt with turning the poop from the cows, right, the methane digester to produce methane. Septic tanks. 1/4 of all U.S. homes have septic tanks. I have a septic tank. If you live in Chiliota, you probably have a septic tank. Household sewage is pumped into these tanks, right? The solids fall to the bottom and are broken down by bacteria. And then you have a pump that pumps that broken down, more liquidy stuff up and out into a drainage field, right? And then it settles down and the poop particles are filtered out and the clean water ends up back into the groundwater and aquifer system. But they must be cleaned and replaced. So you got to get your septic tank pumped and eventually replaced at some point in time. So we're going to look at a sewage treatment plant here quickly and see what happens. So urban areas of U.S. and most developed countries use these. They take your raw sewage. Some of them do it with stormwater and they treat it. So how does this happen? So sewage treatment plants, primary treatment. If you're taking notes on this section right here off to the side of primary, write physical. Because what we're doing is we're trying to physically remove the big solids. All right, so this is the physical part of the process. So first one, screens. When the stuff first comes in, right, we're using screens to filter out any sticks, rocks, cans, and bottles that may have gotten into this flowing material, as well as some of the bigger chunks of your poop. Grit tanks. Heavy particles fall to the bottom. So grit tanks and settling tanks are very similar. Right, you let it sit for a little bit in the grit tank, and the bigger pieces fall out towards the bottom, right, where they can be removed, and then the rest of the material is moved onto the next settling tanks, where they use a flocculant, right, for coagulation. So a flocculant is a material that it binds the particles that are already in the water and makes them heavier. And that way, now if the particles are now heavier, they fall out of the water easier and faster, right? So flocculant binds to particles, makes them heavier, so that they coagulate and fall to the bottom, and then you can move that water now onto the next process, all right? So we've moved, gotten rid of most of the big pieces. Now it would be just like brown-looking water, no real particles in there, big particles, small particles. So yeah, sorry, that's what coagulation looks like with flocculants. Lovely. Impurities. Flocculant attaches to it, it falls. Alright, so secondary treatment. Off to the side, write biological. So what we do is we take bacteria, put it into the water, they feed on your poop, right, and they digest it and break it down. And bacteria will remove 90% of dissolved and biodegradable organic wastes out of this. So this is a very good process right here. So between primary, just the screens, the grit, and the settling tanks, and then this bacteria, we will remove 95 to 97% of organic wastes, 70% of toxic metals, and 70% of phosphates, and 50% of nitrates. That's impressive. Most times now, the process is done. We take this now and then we put it out to be used either by golf courses, right, to irrigate their lawns, or we pump it out into a river, and it flows into the ocean to go back and be part of the water cycle, or we pump it over to an area where it gets spread over land and percolates down and back into the aquifer system, right? But we pump it back out into nature. Sometimes, though, if we know that there is a chemical that we want to target that is common in this sewage, right, we will use tertiary treatment. So this is specialized, and it's using chemicals. So tertiary, you can write off to the side, chemical treatment. We use chemicals to target other chemicals, right? We want to put something into the water that's going to bind with our target chemical, right, form a sediment, and then we can take that out. All right, so you specialize chemicals to filter and remove specific pollutants. Most of the time, if the nitrate levels are still too high, even after the primary and secondary, we'll use it to remove nitrates and phosphates, okay? But like up in the Northeast, which is the industrialized section of the United States, they'll use it to remove industrial chemicals. So let's see, disinfection, the last process. So if we're going to then, before we take it and pump it out, we will make sure that they either run it through, as it's getting ready to be discharged out into the environment, there's either chlorine being added to it, or it's being ozonated, which is using O3, and then pumping it into the water, and then it will, oxygen likes to be O2, not O3. So two molecules of oxygen break off, and they're happy. Then you've got this one molecule of oxygen left over from this O3 ozone. And what it likes to do to become stable is steal electrons. So it goes and steals them from microorganisms, thus killing them. And we also put it through UV light. The UV light kills organisms, and then it's good to go out into the environment. You can review this diagram on page 554 in your book, and that is it. Hope you enjoyed talking about poop with me. Come back, we'll talk some more.